Hey, welcome back again to Tricky Thursday this week. I'm your girl Trisha, owner of Creative Costume Academy, and I'm here to help you with your pattern making details to make it easy so you can start designing immediately. And today for Tricky Thursday, I want to talk about how you make adjustments to a pattern to either increase or decrease the size. This is a question that comes up a lot, and I'm going to talk you through it a little bit, but I think it's probably easier to show you on the table. So basically, the first thing you want to do is you want to take your body measurements. So your bust, your waist, your hip are the main three that you want to look at. Those body measurements, you want to make sure you add in what you want to use for ease, and that is a personal thing, and it also depends on what fabric you're using. If you're interested on more about ease, DM me the word ease and I can send over a free PDF for you. But you want to determine how much ease you want in each area, and that gives you your new measurement, so the measurement you want your garment to fit. Then if you are using a pattern that we're talking about, patterns that either you buy in the store or it's a PDF pattern, and you want to assemble the PDF pattern if that is what it is, and pull out your main body measurements. You don't need to look at the collar and the pockets and all of that, but where you can see the bust line, the waistline, and the hip line. And they may not all match at the same time. You know, if you're just doing a shirt, you might just put the front and the back together. If you're doing a pair of pants, you're only looking at the waist and the hips. And the waist will be one measurement, and then you might have to move it around to look at how big the hips are. But what you want to do is you want to determine how much seam allowance. Now, most patterns will come with seam allowance included, so you want to mark that on your pattern where that seam allowance is to find your stitch line on the pattern, and then overlap, like start with the bust, overlap the side seams, let's say, or if it's a princess seam, you overlap those seams, you kind of pin it together just so you have a solid through area to measure in that specific area. You take your measuring tape, you measure that. Now, most of the time, it will be only half of the body. It'll be one front, which is usually a half, one pattern piece, and one back. So measuring the pattern will give you half of the measurement. So once you get that measurement, then you want to multiply it times 2 and compare that to your measurement that you need it to be with your body measurements and the ease that you want to include. Now, I also do a much more detailed video about this in my Tricky Thursday first pattern part of the process series. So if you want to see a little bit more about that, I do explain it a little bit more in detail, but I will show you today over on the table. But once you've decided, okay, what I need the measurement to be is this amount, and what my actual pattern measures is giving me this amount. Now, if that is more or less than what you need your measurements to be, then you're going to have to make an adjustment. If it is too small and you need to add, say, 2 inches to make it be what you need it to be, you can easily do that on your pattern. I usually say any more than like 4 inches, if it's 4 inches too small, then it gets kind of crazy and you want to disperse adding into more areas, and that gets a little bit more complicated. You may want to find a pattern that's closer to your size to start with. And same going down the other way. Usually if it's too big by 3.5 inches or more, then you might want to find a smaller pattern to start with. But if it's in that range, like the 3 to 4 inch range, you can usually kind of make it work and at least get to a point. Of course, I always say this, I would definitely do a mock-up and test, especially if you're changing the size. Now, I'm not talking about blending sizes. That will be a different video later. But let's say that your garment measures 2 inches smaller than what your body measurements plus the ease ends up being. So you want to take that amount in the bust area, but say it's 3 inches smaller in the hip area if it's a dress. Well, that's fine. You can add a different amount at different areas. It's just about blending that together, and again, I'll show you that on the map. But if it's 2 inches too small, you need to add 2 inches to this existing pattern. If we're going with the side seam, let's say that we have a basic garment where we have a side seam, and and this is half of the body. So if I add a little bit to the front and a little bit to the back, that's going to add a little bit to the front and back on the other side. So if we divide 2, that's the amount we need to add. If we divide it by 4, and I'm adding it in 4 different places, on my front right, which is over here, front right, my front left, and my back right. So 2 inches divided by 4 is half of an inch. So if I, at my bust level, add half of an inch to that pattern on the front and the back, that will give me my added 2 inches. So I'm going to show you a little, it's probably easier to see than it is to explain, but that's kind of the process of how we do that. And of course, you can check out that other Tricky Thursday video where I show you a little bit more in detail. But here, let's go check it out. So here's an example of a pattern, a commercial pattern that I bought. On this particular pattern, it has the seam allowance marked for me. So like I was explaining earlier, you want your bust measurement, so right where these darts meet is going to be my bust measurement. And on this pattern, I'm also lucky that it marks the waistline for me. So if I was going to compare my measurements to the waistline, I could at this level overlap so that my seam lines meet, and then I could measure this area excluding the dart and compare it to my measurements, same thing in the bust area, and determine how wide that would be or how much I needed to add or take away. So the next thing you want to do is trace off your pattern onto a new piece of paper so you can make those adjustments that you want to. Notice I don't have seam allowance or the dart root included because I'm going to be making those adjustments. So let's say that I want to add 2 inches to the bust. And then let's say I want to only add 1.5 inches to the waist area. And I did transfer those waist markings onto here. So 1.5 inches in the waist. Now what I need to do is to divide these by 4, and whatever this number divided by 4 is will tell me how much I'm adding in each area. So 2 inches divided by 4 is going to give me 1/2 inch. So I need to add 1/2 inch at my bust area. 1.5 inches divided by 4 is actually 3/8 inch. And don't worry, I'm not a math whiz. I did use a calculator. So definitely make it easy. So that will be 3/8 inch is what I need to add to my waist to get that extra 1.5 inches on the total circumference. So 1/2 inch at my bust area. I have a dart at my bust area, so that's another reason you're gonna wanna fold and get that dart root again. But I wanna add 1/2 inch here at my bust area, and then I'm going to add 1/2 inch here on my back bust area. Then if I'm adding 3/8 inch here at my waist, so that's why I transferred those waist markings. Here's my waist. I'm going to add 3/8 inch here at my waist, and then I'm going to add 3/8 inch here at my waist there. And you just want to connect these lines. If there was a curve in there, you can do a curve, but this is a pretty straight line up here, so I'm just going to blend these 2 lines where I added the 1/2 inch at the bust and the 3/8 at the waist. And let's say I don't need to add anything in the hips. I didn't really copy it off that far, but you could blend this back in to the original hip line if you wanted, if you didn't need any extra room there. So it really doesn't matter that it's not the same amount at each area, but you just need to, at those specific areas, determine how much you need to add or take away, and then blend those together. And now this red line becomes your new stitch line, and you add extra seam allowance on top of that. So that's how we make adjustments for changing up the size a little bit. And there's more that goes into this, but this is a really easy way to get started in making this adjustment. I hope you find it helpful. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.